So hey everyone, welcome to our Publishing 101 College Outreach video Q&A for all of those folks interested in applying to our Internship Grant Program. I am Senior Program Manager of We Need Diverse Books on the Internship Grant Program. My name is Chelsea Villarreal, pronouns she, her. I'm here with Kayla, part of our Outreach and Awareness Team Committee for the Internship Grant Program. Literary agent and right manager at Aisha Pandey Literary. And then also Talissa on our committee for outreach and awareness. Talissa is an associate manager of national accounts at Penguin Young Readers. So yeah, we're super pumped to have you here, and let's get into the next steps. Okay, so what is the Internship Grant Program? So the Internship Grant Program is a supplemental grant worth $3,000 awarded to diverse publishing interns whose internships take place over the summer. Very important to note, summer internships only at this point, probably more coming soon. The grant was created because of the high cost of living in New York City. We really want folks to be able to get into the publishing industry, and a lot of that is barring based on location. So a lot of, and it keeps folks that are marginalized and underserved, especially students, from accepting these opportunities. So that's probably one of the biggest inspirations behind the program. It's also important to note that this is not an internship within itself. It is a grant program. So y'all will go get the internship and then come back here and apply for the supplemental grant. So this grant award is given to, and a community network that comes alongside it, given to applicants who have secured a summer publishing internship with many of our program partners, which will be all on our website for y'all to kind of take a look at, similarly to where this video will be located. And they will be with either publishing houses or literary agencies. So you can kind of pick your interest based on what kind of genre or field of publishing you are going after. But yeah, that's kind of the general overview of what the Internship Grant Program is.
Okay, so in terms of when and where you can apply for the grant application window goes live on March 1st, and you can apply to the grant program at our We Need Diverse Books website, more specifically on the Internship Grant Program page. I'm going to read it specifically, diversebooks.org/program/internship grants. There you'll find the application, which will give you an opportunity to let the committee who will be awarding the grants for the program learn more about you, answer essay questions on your interest in working in the publishing industry. And it's also a place where you can upload confirmation of your summer internship once you've obtained that.
So just to chat a little bit about the great success of this program. Since its inception, We Need Diverse Books has supported over 80 grantees in their summer internships. While many of our most recent 2021 cohort are still completing their studies, an incredible 65% of our grantees have gone on to work in the industry, with many now acquiring books themselves. We are incredibly proud of the success of the program, but perhaps even more so of the community that we've built here at We Need Diverse Books because of the program. It's a super supportive group of program grantees and committee members, and everybody helps each other out, which is pretty awesome. We're just building a lot of momentum, so it's a really exciting time to apply for the grant. You can get the resources you need to get into publishing and join a community.
Yeah, so I had a very kind of circuitous route to publishing. I know there's some people who know right off the bat that that's the industry that they want to work in. I kind of stumbled into it after, or I should say in the lead up to my senior year. I went to school at Vassar College in upstate New York, where I had an English degree. You do not need to have an English degree to work in publishing, but I just so happened to. I originally thought I wanted to work in journalism. And so I did a lot of freelancing, specifically for a little local newspaper in Atlanta where I'm from. And I covered everything from film to TV to art to books. And that was actually my favorite part of the job, was getting to walk by my supervising editor's desk and pick from a pile of ARCs at the time, or advanced readers copies. At the time, I didn't know that's what they were called. I just knew that they were free books that I got to take, and they hadn't come out yet. And my favorite part was being able to read them and write up a review. So kind of just holding on to that experience. Very quickly realized I didn't want to work in journalism, dipped a toe in the glossy, so in like magazines. I worked at Harper's Bazaar and very quickly found out that a live action Devil Wears Prada was not for me. And so then what kind of came after that was publishing. I knew I didn't want to work in editorial, just kind of what I knew about myself. And so I literally Googled what other jobs are there in publishing besides editorial, and it just so happened that literary agenting was the first thing that popped up. And so I applied for an internship at Liza Dawson Associates, and it was kind of off to the races from there. I started, and that actually I'll stop there because we're creeping into our next question.
And over to you, Talisa.
Awesome. First of all, that was awesome, Kayla. And I learned some stuff about you that was super
I know.
I'm loving that we're doing these origin stories.
Right. Origin stories.
And yeah, I actually see, some similarities in your path and mine. But essentially, I'm from New York City, Brooklyn specifically, to claim my borough. But I did go to school at Barnard College, which is in the Upper West Side. And while I was there, I sort of bounced around majors. I thought about the English major because I'm one of the many, many folks who says, I've always loved reading. And so, I thought I would be an English major. That wasn't speaking to me. I ended up being an American Studies major, which is interdisciplinary. And I think from there really got me thinking like, okay, I'm learning about American history, American literature, and pop culture, and just kind of general research skills. So it kind of, it made me feel like I could go into any field sort of related to the humanities. And then I did not intern in publishing in college at all or ever. So I think any of y'all that are considering interning, you're kind of already a step ahead. But essentially, since I'm from here, I didn't have that same pressure that I think a lot of the folks that I went to school with did of, I have to have a gig by graduation if I want to stay here in New York City. I luckily did not have that pressure. So really senior year, I was just thinking about writing my thesis, really making the most of that last year of college. And then, a couple of days after graduation, I was like, okay, I need to make money. So then I started interning at a law firm, which was a great experience. And it was a contract gig. But when I came out of that experience, I was like, okay, that is not what I want to be doing 40 plus hours a week. Being mindful that we do spend so much time at work. And so that's when publishing kind of popped back into my head, because it is an industry that I considered. My college did one of those great like coffee with alumni programs, and one of the themes was publishing. And so seeing that, a Barnard grad was actually, one of the folks who stood out to me was at Penguin Random House. That had kind of a bit of inspiration going into senior year. So then, when I was like, okay, I think that's something I could get excited about each and every day, is like books and how that works. I did a very similar sophisticated Googling, and I Googled Penguin Random House. Literally, that's my origin story. That was the publishing company that came to mind. I literally just went to entry-level jobs. A sales assistant position is what was open. I interviewed, I got the job. And that is how I ended up in sales and publishing. I did start out as a sales assistant in sales at Penguin Random House. And I'm lucky to say that I actually am still on that same team. So I've kind of been able to grow my career in this one team, which is certainly not to say that you can't explore, because you really can. And that's part of what your internship experience will be, is getting exposure to the different functions and seeing which speaks to you. But for me, it ended up being that sales was a really good fit. So I was specifically brought into a team to provide the most support to two folks who sold our books, Penguin Young Readers, which publishes everything from board books, which are the books for little babies, to young adult books, which is, books for teens and honestly adults as well. And so those folks were selling to Barnes & Noble, which for me, was a really fun, and still is a really fun full circle experience, because again, like I mentioned, I'm from here in New York. And I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with Barnes & Noble, as it is a national chain. And so that's where I would go to growing up. My mom would take me and, get me a book if she could. And so that was just immediately enticing to me, is like, wow, this team plays a role in literally getting the book on the shelf. And so as a sales assistant, it really was just a ton of PowerPoint, a ton of Excel, really just supporting the sales reps and making sure that they had all the information they needed to, partner with Barnes & Noble on opportunities for forthcoming books. But also what I think is sort of cool about sales folks is that for the vast majority of us, we stay with books, and this is, I think, true to many functions, we stay with books for their lifetime pretty much, like as long as a book can sell, which is forever, there's really an opportunity for it. So it's really cool also to be so closely tied to a book, publishing and being new, but at the same time, as movies get made and all these different things happen, books become classics. It's really just cool to be exposed to the book marketplace, new and old.
It's really interesting to listen to hear you talk about being with a book throughout its lifetime, because it's such like a ride or die relationship on so many different sides. And I'll get into that on the agenting side in a second. But my first gig was a product of luck, timing, the universe really being on my side. And so my previous answer, I mentioned that I interned at Liza Dawson Associates, which is a small boutique agency based out of Chelsea, New York, and really liked the experience. And I presumably made a good impression because when I was fast forward a year, this summer of 2018, I graduate from college and I'm looking for a job. I had reached out to Liza Dawson asking for a reference recommendation, and she was like, well, why don't you just come work here? And it just so happened that a job opened up at the time that I was looking, that she remembered me from the previous summer, and so that was how I started off as an agent assistant. And so I spent a lot of my day doing so many things. And agencies are a little bit funky in that a lot of them are mom and pop shops of 1 to 2 people. You have your bigger, more corporate agencies that can be upwards of 20 people. But I was the assistant supporting a really small team of 6 people. But because I was the only assistant, it really was kind of I don't know, baptism by fire, really, like not even to like scare anybody off, but it was, looking back, I'm actually really grateful for it because I got to do everything because it was just me. And so of course I got to review manuscripts that were being, submitted for representation, so queries. I got to draft up editorial letters on the works of current clients. I got to draft up pitch letters. I got to, work with film co-agents, work with foreign scouts, like just the whole shebang, and develop this really well-rounded kind of skill set that I think to this day really helps me. But as I worked as an agent assistant for about a year and a half. And it got to a point where my boss, Liza, could kind of tell that I was plateauing. And so she said, hey, what do you think about starting to take on clients of your own? And so as agents, we are kind of like the author's middleman, their advocate, their creative partner, when need be, their bulldog. And it was something that I wasn't 100% sold on, but it really is flexible in that you can take on as many clients as you want to, or as few as you want to. So I said, sure, why not? And here we are. I feel like it's such a long story, but here we are 3 years later with I want to say, I have 13 clients. And I have since switched over to a different agency, Aisha Pandey Literary, where now I also work as rights manager as well, meaning that I spend a lot of my day trying to sell the translation rights to our clients' various books. And so speaking to co-agents in Germany and France and Spain, and it's a very fun job for international perspectives. So again, that very well-rounded experience. You really do as an agent. So you do so much. And going back to what Talissa said about really being with a book throughout its life, for an agent, you're hopefully, when things go well, you're with an author for the entirety of their career. And so having that well-rounded experience and being able to support them in whatever creative ventures may, come their way, really is something to think about. And if it's something that you're interested in, that not to plug, but I think agenting is a great fit for anybody who just wants to do a little bit of everything, because you really do a little bit of everything.
Renaissance people.
Yeah, yes, you're Renaissance people, you're ADHD people, like myself.
Right.
Yeah.
All the hands in all the pots.
All the hands in all the pots. All the emails and all the inboxes.
All the inboxes. So y'all have 8 inboxes per agent.
Yep. I feel like I'm gonna cop out on this, or just because a day for an agent, it looks so different, just depending on what's going on. No day is the same. And so if you're also someone who's looking for a career where it's literally impossible for you to get bored, agenting is a great fit. But in terms of some typical things that I do, I of course deal with authors first and foremost, my clients, in court, chatting with them about the most recent draft of edits on this new book that we're working on. Talking to them about my submission list, potential imprints that I think would be a good fit for their book, negotiating contracts on their behalf, handling their subrights, as I mentioned in my previous answer. So if there's a German publisher somewhere who wants to publish a translation of their book, that's something that I handle. If there's a film co-agent who wants to represent the film rights, or a producer who wants to potentially option it, right there with them. But then also a lot of agenting, while there's the more glamorous side of getting to have these very fun phone calls with film and editors and whatnot, it's also a lot of chipping away quietly in the background. And so a lot of chasing for contracts, a lot of chasing for royalty statements, a lot of chasing for editorial schedules, really just making sure that the author feels in the loop about whatever is going on with their book. And anytime there's a situation that feels like they don't feel comfortable handling, or they don't know how to approach either somebody on the editorial team or marketing or sales or whomever, again, it's the agent's job to kind of be that middleman and help them feel supported, to voice what they want or what they need. Also, it's on the flip side, it's sometimes our job to manage expectations and help authors get out of their own way, which is also a necessary part of the job. I feel like there's other people I'm sure I'm forgetting about editors, of course, because that going back and forth between an author and an editor, in terms of when a final draft is going to be ready to turn in. Massaging sometimes when that deadline sails by and we have to reorient ourselves when the time comes for the book to go into production, getting to chat with marketing and publicity about what the pre-pub campaign is going to look like. And so I feel like I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but I think as an agent, you by default interact with every single person in the publishing industry as your client's book kind of goes through the publishing machine. So yeah.
So I would say, being in sales, I do probably have a little bit more of a typical day than what you have, Kayla, just because so much of what I do, I say this and I mean this, if you like PowerPoint and Excel, you might like sales. That's sort of the tagline, because there's so much that we do that's really about, frankly, selling our buyers, whoever they may be, whatever booksellers or retailers they may represent. It's really about, what makes this book special. Look at this beautiful cover. The read is amazing. The author has previously published books that have performed really well. So there's really a lot of it that is about this. For me, what I find really exciting, this combination of the creative and the analytical, right? So what I mean by that is, of course, there's a lot of data that goes into it, in a sense of, when you're in sales and you're thinking about how to position a book to your particular customer. In the case of like a Barnes & Noble, right? The framework is that Barnes & Noble only sells books, right? Or for the most part, they sell books and book-related product. As opposed to other places who, just sell books among everything else that they sell. So that in and of itself is a way that you want to position what makes this book special in a sea of books on your shelves. So in terms of a typical day, it's really just checking in on the various life cycles that I live in as a salesperson. And what I mean by that is a lot of the time, and I think this is something that, is true for a lot of different functions, we're working very much ahead of a book's publication. So we're first learning about a book as salespeople. We're learning about a book from editors typically like a year before it's actually going to be on a shelf anywhere. And then we kind of have that year to, as salespeople, because it is such a collaborative role and we are constantly, similar to what Kayla said, talking so much to our internal colleagues, a year to think about just feedback when we see the cover. Do we feel like the cover, really relates to the amazing book we read? What are the comparative titles that we're quote unquote comping this book to? So there's really a lot of prep work that we do as we get ready to talk to Barnes & Noble about a specific set of future books. And then, once a book is closer to actually its publication day, then we want to see how are pre-orders doing? Is events that the author is doing, is that moving the needle? Do we need to have a conversation with our account about anything, in particular that we can do? Where an author writes a Barnes & Noble blog, we're also really thinking about the opportunity for our retailer and that customer. And then of course, another big piece of it, you have the future planning, you have the what's going on when a book is about to go on sale and then is, having its first few weeks and months. And then I would say the third big component, as I spoke to a little bit in the beginning, is what's going on with all the books that already exist, right? It's what is the opportunity, for books about butterflies on Earth Day, right? You want to have books on that shelf. What are authors that are just beloved, by middle graders or young adult readers? What are books that kids are often reading before they go back to school on their kind of summer reading list? So we also have to, once a book goes on sale, that's really the beginning, as we've said before, that's the beginning of its lifetime. But hopefully, in the best of cases, that book is going to go on to be a staple for a very long time. So it's also finding those opportunities. And I would say too, if this excites you, then again, you might be a good fit for sales, is that you're always getting new generations of readers, right? Year to year, people may not be, or day to day, rather, your readers might not be quote unquote aging out, but the babies grow up to be kids who, want to be read picture books. And those kids grow up to be kids who want to read themselves chapter books and graphic novels and middle graders. And those kids grow up to be teens and adult who want to read a young adult. So, the exciting piece is you're working truly with readers and consumers of all ages, because we all know we gift people books, all these different things. And then you're really working with, a book like The Westing Game, where it's for generations to come, people have seen that as a classic book to read when you're that age. So there's really a lot going on. There is a sense of a typical day, but it's also really how do you have one foot in the future, the past, the present, and make sure that all the books are kind of getting their love, and in particular at your account that you sell to. So this might be honestly my favorite question so far, because I'm very happy to report that there are a lot of favorite parts of my job. In terms of working with colleagues, the fact that there are so many folks I get to, work with, it is such a collaborative, partnership-driven business, because to Kayla's point and to this whole idea of the life cycle of a book, you really need every person, from the author who writes the manuscript to the agent who, gets them acquired, to everything down the line that is going to get that book on a shelf and then get it to readers for years to come. There are hundreds of people involved in that, really. And so it's super relationship driven, and there's just an opportunity to partner on ideas. And especially something like working with an account like Barnes & Noble, I really have to partner with so many of my colleagues for them to help me do specific campaigns and things for Barnes & Noble. So I love that it's a collaborative job, even though there also is that room for solitary work, which is kind of a nice balance. And then in terms of other quick favorites, I'm sure everybody and their mother will say this one, but reading the books before they're out in the world is a really, really incredible feeling. I love getting lost in a book, and it just feels like an honor to read something before it's in its kind of final form. And then with that, giving editors glowing feedback about, you read it and you loved it and you're so excited. And then I would also say hearing from authors themselves. This is probably one of the, I would say, weird silver linings of the weird pandemic virtual hybrid world we're living in, is folks are a little bit more accessible. You no longer have to like fly an author to New York to come to your office in order to see them. You can hop on a Zoom call like this. And so just a recent one that comes to mind that was just super incredible for me is Justice Sotomayor spoke to our group about her latest picture book publication with Penguin Union Readers. And she holds a special place in my heart for so many different reasons, but not the least of which is that she's a Puerto Rican from here in NYC, which is my same background. And so it was even virtual. She just emoted the most warm presence. And she's also a really, really big believer in Spanish editions of books, and Spanish and bilingual titles is something that I handle for Barnes & Noble and also have sort of a personal stake and investment in. So to hear her talk about why, it's so important to her that all of her work is immediately translated into Spanish, just getting that virtual, quote unquote, one-on-one time with her, like moments like that are really humbling. And I think what makes the job worth it for so many of us is to play just even a small role in getting important books on the shelves for young readers. So yeah, I would say those are my favorite and probably the most just humbling and exciting parts of the job.
That's so awesome. I just love listening to you.
Thank you. I was such a fangirl. Chelsea, she's probably there. She probably saw me in the chat.
I know.
So
what about you, Kayla?
My favorite parts of the job, two come to mind. Similar to Talissa, I'm lucky that there are a lot of parts of my job that I enjoy, or that are, or that bring joy, I should say. Mm-hmm. One is agenting really allows you to flex your problem solving skills in a way that I think is very unique to that job. And the fact that there is no one day is the same, no one situation is the same, no one client is the same. It really does force you to rely on your intuition as well as your network of agent colleagues and peer group, and some more official resources like Publishers Marketplace, but really challenges your kind of own ability to think your way through a situation and guide someone else through a situation. And there's something about that can actually, while at sometimes can be very scary, can also actually be very empowering of, I know how to do this. Like, I know there's just something that feels really gratifying of being able to kind of make sense of the publishing process for an author, which understandably feels so huge and looming and impossible. And so the fact that I've had several clients half jokingly but half seriously be like, "You're like my fairy godmother," and I'm like, "Oh yes, I'm occasionally a very stressed fairy godmother, but I'm glad that I can make this feel some type of like magic about being able to like create
making dreams come true."
Oh, that's that's a very nice thing to say. But like even in a more basic level, at least giving them an outlet to voice their anxieties and then being like, okay, but we'll handle it. And just being able to say, we'll handle it, can be really gratifying. And then in that same vein, of course, one of my favorite parts is being able to tell an author that an editor is interested in their book and has made an offer, just because the novel writing or proposal writing, and that's for nonfiction books, process can be so just such an isolating time, that you're just, it's just you and the book, it's maybe you and your agent, depending on where you are in your career, but the fact that after such a long period of just it being the author and the work, to be able to come in and say, there are other people who see this and love this, that's a feeling that never gets old, especially if the book has been a little bit battered and bruised, and we've gone out on multiple rounds of submission, and we've gotten passes, and agents say it all the time, you just need one. And when you find that one person and you're able to have that phone call with the author and let them know that somebody's made an offer on their book, it's a great feeling. So as a younger agent, all the books that I've worked on have not come out yet. They have not been published yet. They're all in various stages of production, which is fine. If anything, it's like just waiting for Christmas, if Christmas were 2 to 3 years away.
A long-term You've got plans.
It's all right. I can see it steadily inching closer. But I will still talk about them even if they haven't come out yet. Just because I love them.
Please.
And so,
I want to know.
oh yeah, well, one book I'm really
I know, inside scoop.
Oh yeah, inside.
You heard it here first, folks.
I know.
Keep an eye out. I'll do one middle grade book and then one adult nonfiction book. So for the middle grade book, a fabulous artist named Kat Huang. We just sold her book, her 2 graphic novels called Nostalgia, and the second book was Untitled. And it takes place in this magical antique shop that sells forgotten memories, and it's told from the perspective of this nameless protagonist who you will only know him as Kid, and as he's working his way through the shop and collecting all of these different items, he slowly reconstructs his identity, and then there's a reveal at the end. I won't spoil it, but it's so good.
Oh my gosh. I'm like emotional, and I don't even
I just remember reading the proposal and being like, oh, this is like, yes. And so I'm so happy that we were able to place it, and Kat's amazing. And so that's one book I'm really excited about. And then the second book that I've worked on that I am very excited to come out is by a wonderful essayist named Minda Honey, and it's called An Anthology of Assholes, so a very fun title. And it is an essay collection that follows Minda in her early 20s, in the early 2000s, when she moves from rural Kentucky to sunny Southern California. I always get that backwards. With her high school boyfriend, who she thinks she's going to marry. Surprise, surprise. 6 months later, they break up, and she is kind of jettisoned into early adulthood, as we all are at some point. And each essay, it starts off as this very kind of funny, anecdotal account of these failed relationships that she's been in, hence the title. But it very quickly turns into this like humorous but also poignant examination of young Black womanhood, and puts Minda's existence as a young Black woman in conversation with these larger topics around toxic masculinity, around colorism, around intergenerational trauma. And so it's just like this wonderful tightrope walking between funny and serious. It almost feels like you're having like a girls' night in with your best friend, and you're laughing and crying at the same time. And so I could talk about that one forever.
Yeah. So some of mine would definitely have to be, as I've said, I represent Spanish and bilingual titles to Barnes & Noble, which is a really big deal for me. And so Jackie Woodson, who's an acclaimed, incredible author, and really has a book for literally every single age range, has some wonderful picture books called Day You Begin. And then more recently this year, Year We Learned to Fly. And so those also always get published into Spanish and do so well. And so I really love just having Jackie Woodson in Spanish, and especially, because her picture books are always so beautiful and their illustrations. And then I have 3 other ones. So for anyone who's familiar with Aubrey Plaza, the actress who's done, quite a number of things, but I always shout her out for probably one of her least known roles, but this is just a window into my own personality and interest, is that she had a very small, not even very small, but she had a stint on the show Criminal Minds. So any Criminal Minds fans, it's off TV, but it's on Netflix. Love that show. So she had a stint on that show. But she has written this really, really fun picture book called Legend of the Christmas Witch. And if you caught any of her publicity or mania moments, she was doing interviews about this picture book in a witch costume. And it's also, I love it because it's sort of a remix, of a traditional Christmas story, because it's about Santa's sister and not Santa. And so of course has like her classic witty humor, but it's also kind of perfect for Halloween and obviously Christmas. And so that went on sale in 2021 and had a great, just first season on shelves. And I think it's really fun. And then I'll round out, I have Bluey Publishing. So for anyone who, watches Disney, has young kiddos in their life, Bluey is like this Australian phenomenon. People just love Bluey. And so it's great to have that publishing and just see how well it does. And it's interesting, like people don't typically pre-order an 8x8. That's like the, paperback picture book, And it's typically associated with like media tie-ins, but you know, Bluey is so popular, she gets pre-orders. So that's a really fun one to work on. And then I'll just round out with kind of a recent addition to my selling responsibilities is I've taken on middle grade for Barnes & Noble, which includes Last Kids on Earth, which, you know, you may have heard of it. It's a best-selling series with, you know, ongoing publishing. And I just love the premise because it is literally about the last kids left on Earth in the midst of the zombie apocalypse. So again, a real plug for kids books, really, for working kids books. It's so fun. There's such a range. It's everything from an Australian cartoon dog to kids in the zombie apocalypse to, you know, touching YA about, you know, poignant, relatable topics. So that's my plug for kids books. And those are some of my favorite books I've worked on that are out in the world.
We're closing up shop on this recording. So thank you so much to Kayla and to Lissa from the committee, from the Children's Committee and the Adult Committee on the Internship Grant Program for joining me. To all the applicants out there, good luck. We hope that we could demystify the publishing industry for you a bit. Just keep going, keep applying. You know, it's just all about opening as many doors and windows as possible. And we're here for support. So check out the program page for the Internship Grant Program. And if you have any questions, you can email internships@diversebooks.org. But good luck, everyone.
Good luck. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.